from being risk for suicide just because of their gender or race or age even. And I think some of the other things that I wanted to talk about, we've covered, but I would say a little bit too. I think sometimes people think like there would be warning signs, right? A person will maybe giving their things away, or a person may stop doing certain behaviors that they've already done, and that may or may not be true, right? But that we should ask people how they're doing. And we should mean it when we ask. I was just talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking. I had, when I was a bright new ingenue, a little faculty member here, and I remember we have a common space in the building here that has like the refrigerator, microwave, coffee machine, and also it's like where our mailboxes are and where people make copies and get coffee and all that kind of stuff. And so one day I walked in there, and one of the older senior faculty members was in there. It was a Monday, and he was like, "Hey, how are you? How was your weekend?" And I go into this like, "Oh, doing good. I did this, da, da, da." And then they were like walking out of the room. And I remember having like this revelation of like, oh, that's just making conversation. Like he genuinely was not interested in what I did with the weekend. He just thought that that's what you're supposed to say. And after I got out of my feelings about it, because I was a bit bothered by that exchange, it was eye-opening for me. And I think we tend to do that a lot.
Can we just be real, though? That wasn't an exchange.
Okay, it was not an exchange.
That was a verbal drive-by. That's all that was. That was the McDonald's window.
But if you think about it, we do that a lot, right?
No, that's what we do.
Okay.
So
I'm trying to be a little bit more hopeful.
No. Don't be that one. This is doopy deep, right? So we have to have those real conversations.
But let's also remember you do, but the we is different because you in that New York City, in the big city.
Right, no, I really am. But
you really are, and
true.
like you might get cut. Let me tell you, every time I go to New York, inevitably I'm on the train and somebody asks me for directions. Is this the right train? Am I going the right way? And at first it used to like throw me off. I was like, do I look like I'm from here? Like, why are people asking me? And then it dawned on me,
you got that Brooklyn look.
No, you know what I think it is? I think I look approachable. Like I don't have that look. I probably am making eye contact, and then they're like, oh yes, I will talk to this kind of person. So when I first moved back down south after being on the East Coast for a number of years, I had to recalibrate when I came back down here. With folks like saying ma'am to me, even when I was not old enough to be called ma'am, and I would really be bothered by it. But I was like, oh, that's just a thing that people do, is just being polite. And people would really say, how's it going? So things are a little bit different down here than they are up there with you northerners.
Not all northerners, but quite a few. But what you do find oftentimes is people saying things like, oh, how are you doing? Or how are you today? But I don't think people really want the answer to that question. So I did this experiment one time where I answered people's questions honestly. It did not turn out well. Because people don't want to really hear how you're doing. They don't want to hear how you're doing.
Right.
You know, I had someone ask me, how are you feeling today? Or how are you? No, it was, hey, how are you doing, Tomas? And I said, well, being 40, my mama never told me, I got up this morning, I felt these pains in my back. I don't even know where they came from, and da-da-da-da-da. And she was like, oh, wow. Okay, well. She kept it moving. And I started laughing because I said, why do people do that? If you really don't want to know. Asking someone how they're doing in passing is not a real exchange.
It's not.
It's the same way that we could speak to people all over the world with our phones, but we still don't know how to communicate. Like it's the same thing.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. In that there are social pleasantries, and I'm not at all advocating, Doopy Deep listeners, for you to just go out and start spilling your guts to the next person that you pass by, or riding the elevator with, or sitting, or doing your Uber share ride with. It's only fun for you because you have this really perverse, constant like social like experiment happening in your personal interactions. It's only fun for you.
Wanting to know things.
But because there is an oversharing, right? So I'm the same person who also, like, not only do virtual strangers ask me for directions on the subway train in strange cities myself, but I'm also the person where like most recently, I had to make an insurance claim for some damage done in my house, and the adjuster called me. Now the adjuster called me to make an appointment to come out to my house to take pictures and assess the damage. I was on the phone with that man for 40 minutes with him telling me all of his doopy deets about how many wives he's had, all the divorces when his parents passed away, the fact that his teenage daughter was now a teen mom and he was a grandfather. I got all of that, and I was like, how do I get off the phone? I want to go and like,
and you know what? I'll tell you what the problem is right now. The problem is you should have been recording that, because that is a podcast right there. Doopy Deep with the lie. Insurance adjuster.
It was probably, and that's probably a little bit, I'm going to be completely honest with you all. That's probably a little bit why people do that with me, because I kind of get invested. And I'm like, really? And so how is motherhood going around? Like, I get too invested. So I'm not suggesting you do that with everybody. What I'm saying is we each have to do better with taking the time out to connect with other folks that matter to us. So in thinking about this idea of suicide, I wanted to kind of look and see what are some like verifiable warning signs. So let's move away from the myths and let's really talk about what are some things that you would look for. And there's actually a really wonderful resource that we have. There's American Association of Suicide that has a lot of information that's accessible to the public. And what they recommend is this acronym. That's the right thing, right? Where you have the letters that equal something. Acronym.
Yes.
Okay. There's an acronym called, it's poor grammar, so brace yourselves. Is path warm. Okay. And it's just a way, like
what did you just say?
I said, is path warm? I said it was grammatically incorrect. So brace yourselves. I did warn you.
Is path warm?
Is path warm? We hope not, actually. We want it to be quite cool and cold. So, each of the letters stands for a warning sign that has been shown to be present for folks that have attempted or been successful in committing suicide. So the first is the I is ideation. So that means, is somebody actually thinking about it? And this is really important because most people don't wake up on a Monday and say, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore, and immediately go to killing themselves. There usually is a period of time in which the ideas are present. And sometimes the ideas are just as vague as, I don't want to feel this way anymore. And what usually happens is there's a progression from I don't want to feel this way anymore to having a specific plan to do so. So the first is for ideation. So are the thoughts even there? Second one is if there's substance abuse presence. And why is that important? Because we recognize that engaging in substance use or substance abuse, it alters your capacity to think clearly. So it's another way that the brain is clouded and your capacity for judgment isn't as clear. The third. So we have the I, the S, path. And so now we're on path, right? Purposelessness, right? And this happens if one of the things about human beings is that we need to feel useful. We get up every day for a reason. Many of us structure that around work. But we also have to realize, like, some of us have absolutely no sense of purpose in the work that we do. But we may draw from lots of other places in our lives. Some of us have deep purpose in the work that we do. But when a person isn't able to kind of have that anchoring sense of this is why I am here on this planet at this time, and I am moving forward in doing that thing. That is one of the other warning signs. So purposelessness, anxiety or agitation, right? So remember we talked about like people being depressed and that like kind of that heaviness, that blanket, like not having the energy, not having the sense of excitement or pleasure about things. Well, if you put that together with suicide, that doesn't really add up, right? Because you have to have the actual energy and impetus to commit suicide, to actually make it happen. And so that's how we see where sometimes the anxiety or agitation comes in. So there's a sense of restlessness that has to happen, that actually kind of perversely works to give people the energy kind of to move forward with that decision. So we have ideation, substance abuse, purposelessness, anxiety or agitation, and then trapped. If people feel, and let me be clear, not all of these have to be present, but these are the things that we might want to look for. But a sense of trapped, right? Like I am in a completely dissatisfactory, desperate, bad situation, and I don't see a way out. Things are this way, and things will always be this way. And there's nothing I can do about it. So this feeling of being trapped. And then, as I mentioned before, the next one is hopelessness, right? So things are not going to be better. There's no one to help me. There's no one to make this different or better. It will always be this way. And then now we're going to move into the warm part of the path. So withdrawal. And so, there has to be some disconnect that happens from the world, intentional disconnect. So people are being isolated. They're withdrawing from the things that they normally do or the people that they usually interact with. Sometimes we also will see intense anger or rage, or people may even be focused on seeking revenge. We see that as showing up as well. And then the second to the last one is recklessness, right? So we might see that people start to just demonstrate a lack of care for their own well-being, a lack of concern for their own safety. And then the last one is mood changes, right? So the classic mood changes, right? So if somebody does have a certain or notable change in mood. So again, we might not see all of these, all 10 of these symptoms show up in one person. But if you see a cluster of these, or you see more than one of these, that this is a person that we would consider to be at high risk for suicide. And so the question is, what do you do about it? Right? What I was alluding to earlier was this idea around a sense of connection. And so for me, I want to acknowledge and recognize all the research that exists to support, that those symptoms that I just talked about. I am not a person that sees mental disorders in everybody. Like I don't think everybody has a diagnosable mental disorder, but I also recognize that major depression is way more rampant and prevalent than we want to recognize. So if I put those pieces together, what I know to be true is that a good deal of us are suffering from a profound sense of disconnection, that we really are isolated and lonely. And I really resonate with that point that you made, Tomas, about like we could have friends across the globe, right, that we have access to via this wonderful thing called the internet, and social media platforms have made that much easier. I have friends through Facebook from around the world, people that are in different parts of this country that I connect to on a daily basis, and that are meaningful to me. But what I know to be true is I can make meaning and have real connection in those relationships just as easily as they could be fake and superficial. And so what I think we all have to do better is taking time out and having, I also think the willingness to be vulnerable with others that are in our lives, to form connections and work at maintaining those connections. Because for some of us, this sense of disconnection can lead to depression. Right. So I think sometimes we think I'm depressed, I'm withdrawn. For some folks, a sense of disconnection actually leads to the depression. And then, very sadly and unfortunately,